So today we're going to begin to disassemble the 79 Ford C4 transmission. Okay, the first step in the process was suggested that you remove the throttle valve, and that takes a 9/16 socket, which I've already loosened the bolt. And we'll take this out, and I know there's a push rod inside of there as well. There are a couple different designs of these as you study the C4. Some of the earlier ones thread in. These just push in. They'll have a seal. There'll be a new one that'll come along with the transmission kit. Stick a magnet in there. Hopefully be able to get that push rod out. And here that comes. Perfect. On deck next, we'll remove the servo cover and piston. I've also pre-loosened these bolts to make sure that they are in fact going to come loose. I've taken the transmission right out of the car, so you're going to see some fluid come out. That's why I have this catch basin underneath. Prevent the largest of messes. I've never rebuilt a transmission before. It's one reason why the video is being taken, as a record of how this goes together and comes apart. Until this feels under spring pressure. Make sure that that comes off safely. A little hard to do it to give the camera the angle. Good job. Okay, so when you take it apart, this will be what's inside of there. We'll be replacing this seal along the way. I have a new servo, so we'll replace that. Spring. Now the reason why the servo is being replaced is the seal is molded in part of the servo itself. I was able to get the new servo off of Amazon for about 15 bucks. Okay, so as I mentioned before, the transmission had been taken directly out of the car and put on this engine stand. So now I'm going to empty the fluid out of it. I've just pulled the dipstick. I'm going to give this a rotation to let it dump in the drain pan. Nice and black as I expected to see. Likely the person has been very religious ahead of time for transmission services along its useful life. Right. Now, something I'm going to do that I've noticed on videos is remove the extension housing and the seal while it's on the engine stand. That way I have a nice sturdy surface to work with. Oh. What I did is I ended up holding it steady here, putting the chisel on the side, couple hits, and it started coming loose right away. Right away. Right away. Excellent. Was even to get trans fluid on my shoe. This extension housing should just come right off with the taking out of these bolts. These are 9/16. Here's the identification tag for the transmission. I'm going to certainly retain that for future benefit and happiness. Looks like it's coming apart quite easy. But then again, often things do come apart easy. It's the getting back together that tends to be the challenge. But the only thing I'm going to pay attention to here, taking these bolts out, is making sure that they're the same length overall. Get my speed handle out. I also have here the retainer for the trans cooler lines. We're going to make sure that that gets put back in the right spot. As you can see, it's already loose. Likely, as I take the last bolts out, it'll come right off of my hands. Now with this engine stand being used this way, gives a nice steady surface. There's a lot you can do before you actually have to get it on the workbench. And the drain pan underneath, of course, you can use for engine repair as well. How fun will that be? Okay, that should pull right off of there, which now shows us our governor assembly. Beneath that will be the parking pawl. We are going to also replace this bushing and clean up and paint the tail shaft or extension housing. Okay, I was able to flip this over on the engine stand. I'm going to remove the trans pan. This is 1/2-inch bolts all the way around. As you can see, it's starting to become a smaller package to reckon with. This will be about the last couple moves that we'll be able to do with the transmission on the stand before we have to put it on the bench, because the front pump and bell housing will be coming out. Of course, with it being attached to the engine stand, cannot do that. We'll be able to get the valve body out of there. So far, very exciting on the abilities here of this engine stand and drain pan. My laundry floor is no worse for wear at this point. However, what am I, 20 minutes into the process? Got a ways to go to trash the flow. Okay, last bolt here. Little tap. Let's see what we have in here. We have a little, looks like moisture or something that had been introduced to the transmission along the way. I'm not seeing any larger areas of concern. This moisture might well have been just from the 2 years that it sat in the garage. Next up, I'll pull the valve body out of there. Let me just take a minute to read how to do it. Okay, first up, let's take the filter off. Not sure if I'm doing this quite the right way. I don't know why that one is stripped. Likely should have grabbed the 6-point of the socket, but that would have required running upstairs and outside. here. Maybe it's coming up and out of there. Seeing one thing already to pay attention to. There's a spring and likely some sort of a check ball or other device down inside of here. Yes, there is. Make sure to gather all that gear up. Great. Looking at the book again, it looks like I can continue with the rest of these 3/8 bolts. I'm going to start here with the shift selector too. Okay. Not man enough. Not man enough. Different sizes everywhere. Beautiful. Better make sure I'm taking off the right one. Stand by. The book wasn't exactly clear, so looking at it a little closer, I'm going to undo the 3/8 bolts, which I've already loosened. My hunch is, because I know this valve body splits in half, is if I take these smaller ones off, I'm going to have a problem. I want to do this on the bench, not inside the transmission. So let's see if my hunch is right. We'll take this off this way and see what happens. Don't you like when things are experimental? I've watched the video on YouTube a couple times by the French fella, but even after watching it a few times, I'm not 100% certain on this. Just loosen up that other one before we go further. Like I say, I don't want this valve body coming to two halves in the transmission. It's something I want to do on the bench when I perform the reconditioning there. I can see that this is a good thing because it has lifted up. I'm a happy camper, and you guys should be too. So that being said, after the filter comes off, which we can see the bolts that surround that, we have a spring plate, which I know this one could have came off for the shift adjuster. Then to remember, just the 3/8 size bolts only, and that will pull off the say it, Eric, valve body. Beautiful. There should be two pieces all stuck together. Happy, yes. Oh, careful, there's a shift valve. I feel trying to slip in and out, so y'all, well, it stays fixed, it won't come out. Just being careful. Right, good job. A couple more things again before I take it to the bench, and we'll continue from there. Remove the second band servo cover. I've loosened the bolts already. This should not be under spring tension if I remember correctly, or maybe it is. We're going to find out together as a group. Now this cover and servo is actually going to be replaced with a performance version. Hopefully it will give firmer shifts. The B&M Performance trans kit I'm using, and then this is Performance Transmission, the Performance Automatic brand servo cover I'll be using. What I probably should have done looking at this is release the band adjusters on both sides, because that is what happened there. Living and learning as we go along. Yes, it is under spring tension. Here's a couple things that I noted right away. I see a little bit of material around the seal surface itself. I think it's just simply time for an overhaul, huh? We're going to go ahead and loosen the band servos. I'll do it on this side, then reposition the camera for a better shot on the other. Should be 3/4 inch. That's the adjusting screw, and I shouldn't have said servo, my bad. It's the adjusting screw. Okay, both sides are loose. Let me move the camera and you can see what's going on. We're going to take out and inspect the band struts. This is what actually applies the band. There's one that's attached to the adjusting screw and one that's attached to the servo on both sides. We want to make sure that the contact surface isn't damaged. So this would be for our forward. Then we would have the one for the reverse, and these kind of just slide right in the case like so. Be able to remove it. There we go. Be certain to not get these confused. They look completely different. You can see that the bands are now loose in position. I believe I'm to the point where I'm going to need to get this transmission on the bench, remove our bell housing, and move forward from there. Something that I could have actually done on the engine stand is to remove the governor assembly, and you just would loosen these bolts. Now what you've seen here was what I wanted to illustrate. You could take and put this into park, and that locks that into position, and that'll allow you to loosen these bolts to get this off effectively without too much stress and aggravation. Now this governor you're going to take apart later. Clean the passages. There's a small screen inside of there that will also need to be cleaned. Much like the valve body, you'll be disassembling this small component to assure all old debris is out of there and for proper operation. And that should just slide right off, indeed. And what we'll be taking apart are this spring tension valve and a pressure relief valve, or whatever components might be associated in there. And next, once we get the tail shaft out after we remove the internals, then we can get back here to finish removing the rest of the governor.